Hello, my name is Brian Ekstrom and welcome to my presentation, All About Acoustics. For this topic, I chose to study three sources: Architectural Acoustics by Marshall Long, an article by John Mooney, Performance Space Acoustics, and the textbook provided in our class, Physics and the Arts by Gilbert Pupa. Acoustics are the aural properties that determine how sound is transmitted and spread in its environment. Modern acoustics, as we understand them, have greatly developed since the 19th century, and technological advancements have made it possible to measure the properties of acoustics. A fundamental knowledge of how sound carries itself from its source is critical in understanding how sound sounds in various settings. For example, we know that a string can be plucked in several ways in order to sound itself and reverberate in a room or building. Frequency, measured in hertz, is the pitch of a sounding instrument. The note A4 on a piano is exactly 440 hertz, a common tuning note. Many concert hall designers have taken the frequency ranges of instruments into consideration when building and constructing their halls. For example, in a symphony orchestra, this ensures that every voice or instrument is able to project itself properly, regardless of pitch. The low rumble of a tuba should be just as audible as the soaring pitches of a piccolo flute. Diffusers are also placed on walls to direct the sound farther back into the audience. Another popular addition to concert halls are reflective panels called clouds, which are generally placed above the stage. In our very own music recital hall, we have these clouds set up for that exact reason, and we set them up for many performances in the music building at the SOU. Related to this is the idea of uniformity, meaning that there are no bad seats and everywhere in the performance space is a viable place to hear all of the intended acoustical properties. Construction materials play a big role in the shape of acoustic sound. When a sound interacts with an object, it goes through a series of reflection, absorption, and transmission. The sound absorbing characteristics differ from material to material, such as wood and stone. A building with concrete walls will have a higher degree of impedance than a building with wood walls. Impedance is the measure of resistance to motion, sound waves. But what about instruments that produce multiple frequencies at once, such as a piano or bass drum? These instruments have a largely different effect on the performance space, compared to a single frequency instrument such as the human voice or clarinet. The frequency spectrum determines how many overtones or harmonics are present in a room. A solo vocal performance will sound extremely different when played in a large cathedral compared to playing outdoors. The lack of walls and additional reflective panels result in a lack of intimacy, which is described as a full sound that wraps itself around you. This results in a sound that has a significantly shorter and faster reverberation time. This can have an effect on performances that are performed outdoors, as many performers will opt for amplification or a louder sound in general. When designing concert halls, the time it takes for a sound to reach an audience is determined by milliseconds. The Symphony Hall has a sound response time of 35 milliseconds, which is among the most desirable times and the industry standard. Another important consideration is the overall clarity of a vocal performance or even instrumental performance. When every detail of a musical passage is captured, this is considered great clarity, providing the audience the intended sound. A performance can easily sound muddy and dull if performance space requirements are not met. If you were to play a drum solo in a cave, it would be excruciating and hard to pick up on the subtleties of the performance, as opposed to a recording studio or booth. The idea of acoustics ties into our course of light and sound in a number of ways. Firstly, it is the study of sound waves and amplitudes and how they occupy an environment. These waves can be studied and measured through decibels, frequencies and pitches, and reverberation time, the amount of time it takes a direct sound to fully decay to nothing. Secondly, it is the study of how our environment has an impact on the trajectory and direction of waves. My question for this topic is, How can performance spaces affect the emotional impact of music? More specifically, is there an effect on the emotional impact of music heard in differing spaces, such as a garden or in the hall of a large cathedral? Lastly, I wanted to include an interesting fact that I learned about acoustic design. Over the past few decades, we have been able to pinpoint the exact measurements and environmental properties of a good sounding concert hall or performance space. This has led engineers to copy the acoustic properties of one space to another, achieving the same desired sound in a different space. Adjustments were made to the Xavier University Music Recital Hall after hearing the desired acoustics of a computer-generated acoustic simulation. This hall would likely have sounded very different if the designers were not aided by the virtual listening environment they created.